welcome to the Rob Burgess Show. I am, of course, your host, Rob Burgess. On this, our 188th episode, our returning guest is Dr. Elizabeth Yuko. You first heard Dr. Elizabeth Yuko on episodes 54, 81, and 161 of the podcast. Dr. Elizabeth Yuko is a bioethicist and writer, as well as an adjunct professor of ethics at Fordham University. She has written for print and online publications, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, The Atlantic, Rolling Stone, CNN, Fodor's, Lifehacker, Reader's Digest, and Playboy. And now onto the show. I looked and we started talking last time in March, early March, which was right at the beginning of the pandemic. I had you on because I had just so many questions about this new thing I didn't know about, and obviously a lot has happened since then. But sounds like from reading your article here, especially about being a long hauler, you've had quite an experience since then. And I'm very sorry for that because it sounds awful.
Thanks. Yeah, I started covering COVID for Rolling Stone in February, I believe. And then, I was looking at the last time we spoke, and it was like mid-March. Mm-hmm. And I was going to listen to it, but then I was afraid of, clearly no one knew what was going on. But God, what did I even say at that point? I probably made some terrible, inappropriate joke. And then 2 weeks later, I ended up with COVID myself. Oh. So I got it. My first symptoms were on April 2nd. I live in Queens, which, at the time was the epicenter of the epicenter. There was one particular hospital, Elmhurst Hospital, that was shown on the national news basically every day. People dying in the hallways, the refrigerated morgue trucks parked outside. And so that naturally, that's my local hospital. So when I got sick, first of all, was not able to be tested because I was under 65. And at that point, even if you had all the symptoms, you couldn't get a test in New York, at least. The doctors I had, thank God for telehealth. That has completely saved me during this whole thing. And so through that, having spoken to a few doctors, they basically said, unless you genuinely can't breathe unassisted and would have to call 911 anyway, stay put. So, and I was at the point where I had pretty extreme shortness of breath. And I never turned blue that I recall. But, I constantly thought I was having a heart attack, stuff like that, where I'm like, any other time I would be in the ER, but I am here by myself. That was a whole thing. And then, I had my acute period was about 3.5 weeks. And then that's when the shortness of breath and all that went away. But then a lot of my symptoms just never went away. The extreme fatigue, muscle aches, headaches, body aches, night sweats, a whole bunch of gastrointestinal issues, brain fog, and some cognitive things that haven't been great. And I just kept waiting for them to go away, and they didn't. And so by June, that's when I started to get a little suspicious and was like, you know what, something is not right here. I am just not getting better. And that's when I started interviewing and asking doctors about this because, at that point I was writing still pretty frequently and still am for Rolling Stone about COVID. And so I was regularly interviewing, top doctors about this and be like, hey, guess what? Off the record. The first week of April, what's happening to me? So, they were like, oh yeah, unfortunately there's a lot of you. And I've just been a hermit. It's bizarre. I haven't been on the subway or bus or into Manhattan since March 7th. So, I'm cautious to a fault. The first time I got it, we weren't wearing masks yet. So that was, I could have gotten in the elevator
I think I may have even asked. I also did not go back and listen, but I have a feeling I asked you at some point about masks, and I don't remember what you said, but I remember nobody knew what the right answer was at that point because I felt like there was such mixed messages because like the initial thing I heard was like save it for the people, the frontline workers, and then it was like, no, now everybody wear them, and then it was just kind of like back and forth a little bit at the beginning. So I don't think anybody knew at that point for sure. I mean, I was still going at the beginning. I was like going into supermarkets without it on because it wasn't required yet. I'm just trying to remember those days. It's so like second nature to me now to put on a mask anytime I go indoors. But yeah.
It was, I want to say, the mayor and governor started talking about, we had to wear a mask. I want to say it was like mid-April in New York.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I was definitely well within the nobody was wearing masks phase when I first got sick. So, but I was definitely wearing a mask a few weeks ago when I contracted COVID for a second time.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So this is something I was very concerned about when I heard first reports of this. So you went from, I guess, from your first bout, you tested positive and then eventually you tested negative.
I never actually tested positive the first time because
Okay.
they, because I was under 65, they wouldn't
Okay.
let me take a test.
Huh.
So unfortunately, almost all long haulers who are, not senior citizens fall into that category. Very few of us have the legitimate test from the beginning, which is so frustrating because that's just another excuse for doctors not to take you seriously because you don't have this proof.
Oh, wow.
But I would have gladly given you, a nasal swab or blood or whatever you wanted, but like we were not permitted to get that. But I have seen a few different doctors and, I interviewed a bunch of other ones and they kind of said, I absolutely had it. There was, they had no doubt.
Wow.
So yes, but anyways, but I tested negative twice between first time sick and now.
Right. Okay, that's what I was going to ask. I didn't know if you had some like low level infection, but it sounds like it was two separate incidents. But now the reason I was told that was not usually possible was the antibodies would build up after the first infection and therefore give you this is what the herd immunity idea is based on, I think, right? Because once you have the antibodies in your system, then theoretically that serves the same function as a vaccination, and therefore your body knows how to fight it off. But is there am I misunderstanding that at all, or how did this happen?
So there's a few things. I mean, because we're only really 1 year into COVID, there's still so much the doctors and researchers don't know. And I've basically defied science for almost a year now myself, because so many things are weird and don't make sense. Not everybody develops antibodies.
Wow. Okay.
So yes. I've been tested twice for antibodies. Once in May, which was negative, and I was still symptomatic at that point. And after I got the negative test and saw a different doctor, it was like, how did you not develop antibodies? Like it just didn't make sense, and so we looked into it, and yeah, not everybody will develop them. Most people do, but it's not guaranteed. And also, they might be fading relatively quickly. There are a handful of studies out at this point that have been tracing levels of antibodies in people who've recovered. And for some people, they last 6 weeks. For some people, they last 4 months. So there's a few options. I could have never developed antibodies at all because I had another test for them in September. Although at that point, if I did develop them after the first time, there was a very good chance they would have disappeared by then anyway. So that's one possibility. And then brain, you're not working well.
Well, I was going to say, is there a chance that any of these mutations that are going around could have something to do with it?
Yes, as a matter of fact. I don't know for certain, but the week I got infected, the second or the 2 week period when I, would have potentially been infected, the second time was right when the new UK variant was first spreading around the city. So I may have 2 variants. That's not something to brag about. Sorry, that came across. Yeah, so that could have happened. And yeah, so either I might not have developed antibodies at all, or if I did, they went away, which is unfortunately a possibility. But you're not wrong about how herd immunity works. But because this virus is just so unlike anything we've ever dealt with, we're kind of just guessing for a lot of things.
Yeah, there's just a lot of scary things about this because I haven't read all of your articles quite yet, but I was wondering, I heard this was breaking the barrier to the brain, or the blood-brain barrier or whatever. This is that's why there's these neurological effects. I'm totally garbling with whatever the science of that is, I'm sure, but you know what I'm talking about at all.
We really thought that COVID was a respiratory virus.
Right.
As such. But as we learned more, we learned it was really an inflammatory virus and a vascular virus. So something, that could really happen anywhere in your body. And your brain is absolutely one of those places. And so neurologists are definitely on the case and have been, conducting studies, or at least observing patients since the beginning. And it's weird. And honestly, it's the thing I probably struggle with most, aside from the fatigue and then also getting COVID again. Because so my job is I'm, a full-time journalist. And then last semester I taught a bioethics course back at Fordham University. And so, I need my brain all day, every day.
Seems important.
Yeah. I'm reporting on the pandemic that I am also living through. Yeah. And then also teaching it to, a group of master students. So and it was weird because there were definitely times in class where it's like, guys, I just totally lost my train of thought. I don't even know what I was saying. Will someone please clue me in? And because it was COVID caused, it's all been very weird. So for me, and I think the most common neurological complaint is the brain fog, which is not something I've experienced before. And you just totally lose your train of thought. I'm sometimes not able to come up with words. My mother had a traumatic brain injury probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And a lot of what I'm experiencing reminds me of what she went through, which is terrifying because she was hit in the head pretty hard. And I interviewed a neurologist, and he was like, "Oh no, that's exactly what might be happening," and that's where they're looking to for potential therapies. So,
rest your brain for a moment. My daughter is having a little bit of a meltdown right now, so I will be right back. Excuse me, just 1 second.
No problem.
All right, I am back. Anyway, a stuffed bird was missing and then located, so everything's fine now. Everything's fine. Anyway, back to the serious medical talk. But yeah, so that is one thing that these people, when these politicians talk about, or these people that want to minimize this, they're always like, "What's the death rate? 0.0 0.10001% or whatever. It's like, yeah, that doesn't include the everything else that continues to be wrong for people. A lot of these doctors are saying the MRIs that they look at are like the lungs of like an 80-year-old smoker, and it's like we're talking about like a 20-year-old, and it's and I always, here's another thing that gets me is people are always like, well, I don't have any pre-existing conditions. It's like, how do you know? Really? Are you sure about that? You really, really sure about that? Are you sure you know everything about your health? Are you sure you can bet everything on not having some secret thing wrong with you that you don't know about? I don't know.
It's and even if you don't have pre-existing conditions, there are examples of professional athletes that have had and are now not able to, do their sports job anymore.
Right.
So, I mean, I am not in peak physical condition. I was not before the pandemic, but yeah, it does make you feel better to see. Well, not feel better. Not in like a Schadenfreude type of way, but to see other people struggling with that too.
Yeah.
Because I was also told by one of the doctors that I was seeing in like September, October, that a lot of my problems were because I'm overweight. And they were just like, so this is from that. So everything I was dealing with was minimized to either my weight or my depression and anxiety.
Well, I don't know. You probably saw this video of the black female doctor that was in the hospital and was not believed about her symptoms. She was in the hospital where our daughter was born here in just north of Indianapolis. Do you know what I'm talking about? That?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of that going on. They just, they're not believing people when they tell them this is what's wrong with me. It's like, oh, it's something else. It's got to be something else,
There's so much disbelief. And I mean, everyone I'm sure has at least one family member or friend who just genuinely is not taking this seriously at all. I don't know what to say. And so I'm sure I've mentioned in previous interviews, I'm originally from Ohio, and like things are bad there now, but for a long time, I was the only person most of my family knew had COVID. And they chalked it up to, I live in New York, that's it. It's, it's your problem. You decided to live in the city, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, it's just, and I understand it's probably more denial than anything else, that it's just really hard for us to accept that in 2020 and now 2021, we don't have some sort of magical cure for, a virus like this. That's terrifying. And nobody likes to think about that and, the implications and what might happen if the next pandemic has a higher death rate than COVID.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I think about that all the time. Look how poorly they've managed this, and think if it was even a little bit worse, it would just be pandemonium. Like, it's already like rocking our society, and it's, it's obviously, we've got what, 400,000 people dead, and who knows how many people with, injuries that are going to last the rest of their life. But man, imagine if it was like Ebola level fatality rate. That could be, I don't know.
I do not have a great track record at the moment with catching pandemic diseases, so I really don't want to find out what happens, down the line. No,
absolutely not. But to maybe possibly a more hopeful note, you've been doing a lot of writing about the vaccines that are coming online here. What do people need to know about them as in terms of, I wonder, I know that this is not as prevalent as maybe, the stories get blown out of proportion a little bit, and I think you wrote about this a little bit, but the allergic reactions possibly to the vaccines. And I think that's a real thing, because if you have allergies to other similar type vaccines, there's a good chance that you might as well. And could you just speak on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So there are allergic reactions to every vaccine out there. Unfortunately, that's part of the risk that we as a society and medicine uh, agree to when we get vaccines, is knowing that there is that small risk something could happen. But the fact that the chances of that are so much smaller than the benefits of, protecting yourself, protecting your family, etc. So there's that. And then also people seem to be really concerned about the fact that you're supposed to wait 15 minutes in the pharmacy or doctor's office, the waiting room or whatever, just so in case you had a reaction, there would be someone right there. But I have to do that every year when I get my flu shot.
Mm-hmm.
So like, guys, that's not new. Are you just not? I guess that particular section may not be getting their flu shot every year. So I think part of what's been challenging about the vaccine from the beginning is that most people aren't usually paying this much attention to a medical development or clinical trials or a vaccine. And so things that are completely normal in the research process, people have been panicking about as we went along. At one point, when the Johnson and Johnson trial was temporarily suspended, people just, okay, well, that one's not going to work. Bad. Well, no. The fact that it was suspended shows that the process is working because, we're getting reactions to the vaccine, and it's not because, that was still back when there was, Trump was saying, vaccine by the election, and started having this other type of suspicion about it that, because of the ties to him, and he was, rushing things through, that it wouldn't be safe. But when Johnson & Johnson, and I think AstraZeneca also suspended their trials briefly, I took that as a good sign that, they're following protocol.
But yeah, I was definitely suspicious about that. But now that that deadline has passed, I'm less suspicious, of course. But it did beat the previous record for vaccine by several years, did it not?
In terms of
from the beginning of the of the the virus to when they had a vaccine to distribute. I think that I heard that it was the fastest by several years. But the previous record was like 4 years or 3 years or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was, I think people may also be a little bit suspicious of how quickly it all came together. But I also heard, I think it was, I think, it was a This American Life, where they had interviewed a guy who was working on the previous incarnation of another. It was either, I think, MERS. I think it was. Anyway, he had been working on a vaccine for that, and then he was able to take all the research because it was similar enough to immediately start on work on this vaccine. So, what do you've talked to some of the people that developed these vaccines? Tell me about how they got this out so fast. I'm kind of amazed at that. So,
it's remarkable, and it's like, I think, there's so much bad stuff happening with the pandemic that I don't think we really fully appreciated what we did. Well, not we. I didn't do anything.
You alone, pretty much, right?
What we were, scientists were able to accomplish, it was unbelievable. And so many different people I interviewed in the medical treatment side of things, the medical research side of things, just kept saying, we've never in the history of humankind done anything like this before. And so, yeah, people might be suspicious. But yes, how it happened so quickly. First of all, you are not wrong. The COVID vaccine especially the mRNA variety, which is what Pfizer and Moderna both are, build upon years or really probably decades of research. So they weren't developing this specific vaccine for this particular virus, but I don't know, like a delivery mode system that was, created for a different vaccine is used now. So, the way everything is, it'll take multiple steps to get to one point where that fits into the overall picture. Anyway, I'm not explaining that well, but you're right. This is building on previous research. So it's not like they went into the lab and just, had to start pouring test tubes into each other until something worked. The other thing that happened, and this was something that I asked about a lot as I was interviewing some of the researchers, was that all of the usual bureaucratic slowness of the research process was sped up considerably. People were working in labs 24 hours a day, and it wasn't just that. The FDA, when it came time for them to not approve it, at the end, but do just the approvals for the, first phase of the clinical trial, people worked long days, 7 days a week. They, put everything else on the back burner to focus just on this. So, or, the institutional research boards at the universities who conducted the trials, they might only meet 3 times a year. And, if you get approval within 3 months, that's considered really good. But, the committees met, they approved things within days. So I think the figure one of the researchers gave me is that things that usually took 3 to 4 months took around 7 to 8 days.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's not science. That's just, getting ethics approval, getting approval from the FDA, that type of thing. So that was a huge, huge time saver. And then the first time, when the beginning of the phase 1 trials, some of the researchers had the foresight to create recruitment tools and consent forms and that type of stuff that could be used not only for the phase 1 trial of this, this particular vaccine, but for other coronavirus research projects in the future. So I think it was just a matter of people doing their jobs really well. And and things just happened very efficiently. And it was a very all hands on deck situation, it felt like. And they knew what they were doing and what they had to do. And obviously did not want to cut corners in any way. So they were able to go through the whole usual, process of safety procedures and everything, but just doing it at unbelievable speed.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it was a different. You mentioned, I think, it was mRNA. You said is the type of vaccine, and that is different from other types of vaccines.
Yeah. So when we think about vaccines, usually just like broadly, we usually think about when we get a small, very weakened dose of the virus. So, for like the flu vaccine or something else like that, but you're not receiving a dose of SARS-CoV-2 with this. Basically, the mRNA is injected into you. It's like a little messenger, and it has proteins that the body thinks are associated with the novel coronavirus, and triggers an immune response to those fake proteins, little spikes, and the mRNA part itself disappears. I want to say in 1 to 2 days. One of the, I don't know if it was Dr. Fauci, someone described it like a Snapchat sort of thing. Like it goes in, does what it needs to do, and then it just disappears. So like, and that delivery method is very safe. And it's something that's been around since I think the 70s or 80s. So like the concerns about you're going to get the virus because you're given, an injection of it. Nope. Different type of vaccine. And then also, because it was called mRNA, people associated that with DNA and thought that the vaccine would change their DNA, which it also does not.
Yeah. And that is, not uncommon for people to feel the effects of mild symptoms of the virus afterwards, because that is the body responding to the vaccine. And I think people sometimes think, well, I got my vaccine and I still got sick. Good, this vaccine.
Yeah. And I mean, that's happening with the COVID vaccine also. It's not the same situation, but, it's not, you're not getting the actual virus, but the point of the vaccine is to trigger the immune response.
Right.
To COVID. So when people are getting side effects, the ones that usually last 24 to 48 hours, that's a good sign. That means your body's, accepting it, doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I think the most people have to do is, take some Tylenol, and some people do take the day off after their second dose, because that is supposedly for some people rougher to deal with. But anyone I've spoken to who has gotten to that point of having 2 doses has basically said, like, sure, I'm uncomfortable, but I don't want COVID. Like, there's not even, like a comparison. Because I've also spoken to people who said, well, if a quarter of people are asymptomatic, then I might have a worse reaction to the vaccine than I would to the virus itself. Yeah.
Oh man. But these mutations, I know that they said at first they were like, well, we don't know if it makes the vaccines we have less effective. And then I started seeing, maybe a little bit. And now they're like, well, we can retool it and get it covering the new mutation. So how does that figure into, because I gotta imagine the vaccine that we have is better than nothing, even if the mutation makes it a little less so. Or I mean, I don't know if it's a little, but it's got to be a greater than zero amount that you get, even if you do encounter a mutation. You know what I mean? Like it's got to be something to it, I would think. Well, I mean, what do you know about that?
Basically what you described is accurate, and there's still so much we don't know. And when the vaccine was being developed in April, we didn't know that this new UK strain or South African strain would be happening, and so they were working with the strain that was spreading. But even if it's not as effective, I mean, the efficacy rate is unbelievable for Pfizer, at least.
Yeah. What's 95%, right? Isn't that unheard of for a vaccine? Like I've always heard, like, what's the regular flu vaccine, like 30 to 40% or something? It's super low in comparison. But this is like up. It's up there.
It is. It's like MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, and rubella levels of efficacy. When that first interim report came out, I immediately contacted one of the researchers and I was like, something's off. This
right.
It cannot have, or like I guess at the interim report, it was they said around 91%, and it's just, I mean, they were obviously delighted, but so the FDA's threshold for them to entertain the going through the approval process with the vaccine was 50%. So if the phase 3 clinical trials did not end with 50% efficacy, the FDA wouldn't have looked at it. So that was really the goal people had going in, was, we really, really want to make this 50%. And then, if you asked for best case scenario, a few people were like, okay, well, 60% would be like best case scenario. If we got up to 70%, I would do cartwheels down the middle of the street. Like so far beyond our expectations. And then so 90 was just, I still kind of can't believe it. And then that's another reason people are skeptical, because they're like, well, how could this be more effective than the flu shot if we get the flu shot? So it's, and I get that, and that's healthy to have skepticism about medicine and science, and well, maybe not science, but because there's so much garbage wellness stuff out there that for that reason, I'm glad people are asking questions about things they're putting in their body. But like, this is not some Instagram influencer situation. It is.
Are you saying that the essential oils will not help?
I used them so faithfully and I got COVID again.
This peppermint, I've been using it for months now. I should be immune, right? This is, yes, I've got to have some kind of immunity.
Go ahead, take the mask off, lick the grocery.
Sure, absolutely.
So yeah, but anyway, so yeah, it's for that reason, I'm glad people are asking questions. But yeah, it's also, getting to be a little challenging because the widespread hesitancy. Although at this point we're running out of vaccines.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
So then, because I'm always thinking about this in terms of coverage, and I'm at some point we're continuing to work on an article on hesitancy and different public health messaging strategies. And then as I'm kind of absorbing this last wave of news, I'm like, wait, that might be pushed, because we'll get there eventually and we'll have to deal with vaccine hesitancy then. But right at this moment, that's not our biggest concern, because we don't have the vaccines to give to everybody who might be hesitant.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, here in Indiana, locally, I've been writing about it. We were expecting the federal stockpile, and then that didn't exist. It turns out, spoiler alert, no more extra doses were coming, and they were going to roll it out. They started, and every state has had to fend for itself. And make up its own rules. And here the rule was that first it was 80 and older, and then it was 70 and older. Well, first it was, of course, healthcare workers and EMS and fire and police, first responders. And then they moved it to 80 and over, and then 70 and over. And then they were going to do 60 and over, but then they found this out, and they're like, well, we'll do 65 and older at a time, TBD. And then they, this is so frustrating too, and I'm sure this is on your radar. It's right in your wheelhouse. But Pfizer, there was, when this first rolled out like a month ago, the people medical, the people in the hospitals were saying, look, these Pfizer vaccines, they say they got 5, but really you can get like 6 or 7 if you play your cards right. And I'm like, oh, wow, we got extra doses. And now Pfizer's going back, and they're like, we want to get paid for those extra doses, and we're minusing it away from what we're going to be sending you in the future. And I just, it's like, we can't catch a break. Like, I thought we were getting ahead of this, and now it's like, we got the vaccine, but no, you don't. It's been, the rollout has been less than ideal. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes. Yeah, exactly what you described is, I went through the same roller coaster of emotions, like, bonus vaccine.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, we're getting ahead of this. Yes, we can, more people. Exactly. Call the people. They have a waiting list locally where people that can't get, they'll call them, and they're like, we don't want to waste any. Go. And now it's like, there's none extra anymore, and I don't know.
Yeah, and that's a question I've been asked multiple times, is what's happening with that and why is everything so bad? And I wish I had a good answer, but part of it definitely is that for years, I would say at least going back to George W. Bush's administration, there have just been cut after cut to public health budgets on state levels, local levels. I know we don't have like a national official like a public health department, but like CDC and NIH, you know, that type of thing. It's just been something that has been seen as superfluous. And if money had to come from somewhere, frequently it came from the, you know, the public health budget. If, you know, if you weren't taking away like music for children or, you know, something.
or twirling your mustache and thinking of something else evil to do.
Sorry. It's a coping mechanism at this point. But yeah, so that, you know, and so the budget cuts got rid of personnel. It got rid of programs. It got rid of logistical things that would make something like a national vaccine rollout during a pandemic possible. And so just years and years of cut after cut after cut. And then, you know, things got a little better during Obama, but then next guy came in and did his thing. And now Republicans are getting like surprised that this is happening. I'm like, no. Like, you've been doing this for 20 years.
Right.
Budgets. And when you were taking, like, when a pandemic's not going on, I can see why people, you know, might want to use that money for more urgent matters. But like, come on, it's when you need it, you really need it. So that's part of it, is that just so many of these departments are understaffed, underfunded, and have just been overlooked for so long.
Well, and the profit motive isn't going to support empty hospital beds during not a pandemic. You know what I mean? So if that's, you know, like you said, if the cut's got to come from somewhere, it's going to come from there. So now I wanted to ask you, though, I don't know if you've written about this yet, but I think you've mentioned the main, there's four main ones. There's two that are out on market, and the AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson are TBD, but there are also, and I don't know how effective these are or how much we should trust these, but there's a Russian one I know about. There is a Chinese one that I've heard about. What is there any others around the world that we should know about, and what kind of efficacy do they have, or safety for that matter?
Great question that I don't have a good answer to. I would not recommend the Russian one.
Okay.
Unless it's a different one, but they had very small phase 3 trials, and they came out, you know, a few months ahead. And I mean, the whole thing got very space race Sputnik sort of. I mean, that's what happened. You know, they literally named their vaccine after Sputnik. So kind of did this. You know, it was an intentional sort of thing. But yeah, so that one gives me pause.
Sure.
Looking at the well, I was supposed to say looking at the data, that I don't think it's publicly available.
Yeah, I don't think there is any data, I guess. That's part of my confusion.
So, yeah, because, you know, with Pfizer and Moderna, I can download, or anyone can download pretty extensive data from the clinical trials and look at things like side effects, you know, and stuff like that. So nobody can really even make that determination about the Russian one. There are a few different ones going on in China, but I don't really know enough about any of them. Yeah, the one I just would not be too keen on is the Russian one.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not going to take that one, I don't think. And I don't think Dr. Fauci would say you should either, so I don't think I'm flying off the handle there. But now I know that you said that I did want to ask you one impeachment question, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, because you did write about impeachment recently as well. Is there a possibility that there could be a secret ballot for, as you know, these are jurors in a trial, normal jury, as I understand it, doesn't usually have to say who voted which way unless they volunteer that information. Is that possible?
Is it to have some Republicans vote?
Well, everybody, like instead of making your votes public, like on a roll call, is it possible to vote guilty or not guilty as a senator? Could there be a rule passed? Is that a protocol that could be instituted? Are people talking about that?
I don't know. From what I have read in the Constitution, it's pretty limited because, the founding fathers didn't foresee any of this happening. I mean, take your pick. But the other side of that is there's also no provision saying it's not permitted. So much of what we've been dealing with especially the past 3 weeks is, well, we don't have any precedent for this happening, but we also have no precedent saying we can't do this. How's it going to turn out?
Mm-hmm.
So that's not something I know.
Okay.
It's gonna be an experience.
Oh, I know. Well, and it's going to be after the fact. Now, so the vote to just disqualify him from running again, does that have to be? That's a separate vote, I understand, that could be taken. And do they have to wait until after the trial to take, or they vote on the trial and then they can vote on that measure? Is that would that be the way that works?
It would be first they would have to convict him.
So you can't do that without a conviction?
Yes.
Oh, okay. See, I thought maybe we could fall short of a conviction and still, but you're saying that you have to have both.
I believe so, yes.
Wow. Okay.
That's the tricky part. You have to have the
Man.
two to convict.
Well, I'm disappointed in that answer. What am I telling you?
I feel like, oh, I'm crushing your dreams.
No, darn your reality.
But and there's it doesn't specify what the disqualifying from future office vote is, but it's been a simple majority rather than the 2/3.
But you would still have to get the 2/3 before you get the simple majority.
Yeah.
Well, why even have it? Never mind. It's fine. You're not the one that makes the rules. Go ahead.
It's Jefferson.
Yeah, right. Mad at him for other reasons.
That's true. Oh, don't do bad things like slavery.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Oh. There's so much, but yeah. And did you watch Seinfeld?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so do you know the episode where Kramer sees the movie about the person in the coma and goes to see his lawyer, Ben Stein, and they have all these scenarios of like Ben Stein's like, okay, you're in a coma, you can eat, you have no brain function, and then Kramer and Elaine like respond like, yank it like you're pulling a chain, or something like that, or like, nope, I want to stick around, or I want to. That was what it was like when I was interviewing the common law professor from George Washington, and I was like, okay, here's the situation. It is 11:25 p.m. On the 20th. Trump resigns. He's just sworn in, and then he's never officially removed from office because he resigned. So I was asking this poor guy like, all of the different weird scenarios that could happen, and like some of them are out there, but at this point everything is out there.
Everything's out there. Absolutely.
He's very patient with me, and a lot of them we don't know. Like, well, that's a great question. We have no idea what would happen if that was the case. But right. The day of the inauguration, I don't know who it was. Someone on either NBC or MSNBC was saying that the license plate for Joe Biden's, the car he rides around in that says 46, they also had one made that said 47 in the event that something like that did happen.
Wow.
Yeah. So because I thought it was, just my imagination running wild. But no, I guess they had the same idea that could happen. So
Wow.
yeah.
Huh. Well, and this is interesting too because it's taking place after his term. So yeah, the whole thing about removal from office is kind of a moot point, but yeah, it's just it's crazy, and I can't believe they're waiting so long. I know that they want to get other stuff done, but I honestly think they could pull it off in 30 minutes with commercials, just show the tape of him telling everybody to march down there and then show them doing what they did, and in case the prosecution rests, I think. I don't know what else, because it's like the other ones are like, well, obstruction, and we don't have a tape of the call, and this person heard this, and I was disturbed, and it's like, well, but it's like people had cameras, high definition, like we saw it happen. Did you experience it? You check yes.
Yeah, I mean, he's provided us with really great and substantial evidence against
right. Exactly. Oh yeah. And then all the did you see the thing about how all the Parler users accidentally shared all their location data inside the Capitol after that was incredible. Brava. I knew that all that posing for the gram inside the Capitol building was going to come back to haunt them. Like, as horrified as I was of that day, I'm like, all right, we're going to probably be able to find most of these people. They probably tagged themselves in all their photos, I bet.
It blew my mind. And Thursday, so obviously, the insurrection was a Wednesday. And then the following day, that Thursday, I interviewed Saul Loeb, who is...
Yeah, I read that. That was really interesting.
Yeah, and a photographer with the AFP. Stuff got picked up by Getty. And these people were freely giving him their first and last names.
Wow.
Because when, even if it's just a, photographer without the accompanying reporter, they still have to get the names and stuff like that. Clearly they must have known what they were doing.
Right.
Like that. Yeah. I mean, and Saul was obviously pretty surprised about that part too.
Yeah, just incredible. But well, I've kept you long enough. I thank you so much for taking all the time talking with me here. What have you been watching or listening to, or anything to recommend to the people?
My listening to has been weird. Well, not weird. Basically, my writing music for the last few weeks of the Trump administration was Mozart's Requiem.
Wow.
Which is pretty, especially the Dies Irae part, which is, 2 minutes of pure anger. It's not like a pretty background. No, it's pretty intense. And that's the thing that, I've been thinking of. And then just kind of background instrumental music by some of the session musicians from 60s and 70s who, put out different songs and stuff like that. So weird.
No, that's smart, because I feel like if I listen to songs with too many lyrics when I'm writing, it jumbles up the word making part of my brain, and the listening to the beat part of my brain start fighting with each other. It's like they like each other if they can play separately. You know what I mean? When they start having to think of all the clever lyrics, it's like, I can't compose words anymore. Help.
Yeah, and then just a lot of normal, quiet background classical music for writing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, we've been doing a classical music lessons with our son. We started homeschooling him this last year, and there's a program that he does with different composers, so that's been fun.
Oh, wow.
So, but cool. Well, I hope you get some rest here, and I hope to talk to you again soon. I'm sure I'll have a bunch more questions that nobody knows the answer to to ask you. I feel like I ask things that no one could possibly know at this point in history, and then when you listen to 6 months, people will be screaming at me like, "No, Rob, you don't understand."
Well, hopefully next time I will not have had COVID 2 more times.
Oh my gosh, I hope not. I hope 2's enough.
Right. Well, I mean, I hope I have it 0 more times, but
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, great. Well, yeah, I will definitely keep reading your stuff, and yeah, I hope to have you again soon on the podcast, and have a good start of your week here, I guess, tomorrow. So.
Thanks so much. You too.
Cool. Have a great night.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye. Join the Rob Burgess Show mailing list. Go to tinyletter.com/The Rob Burgess Show and type in your email address. Then respond to the automatic message. Also, please make sure to comment, follow, like, subscribe, share, rate, and review everywhere the podcast is available, including iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Twitter, Internet Archive, TuneIn, RSS, and now Spotify. The official website for the podcast is www.therobburgessshow.com. You can find out more about me by visiting my website, www.thisburgess.com. If you have something to say, record a voice memo on your smartphone and send it to therobburgessshow@gmail.com. Include voice memo in the subject line of the email. Also, if you want to call or text the show for any reason, the number is 317-674-3547. Until next time.